Pilot Boys in the building. Welcome to the Pilot Boys podcast, where you'll get the real on all things sports, music, and pop culture. I am Mecca Don here with my co-host V.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Today is January 2nd, 2020. It's 2020, V.
Wow, I can't believe I made it this long.
It was like 1995, like 2 years ago. Happy New Year to you all. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. This is our first show, of course, of 2020, and we hope you all will stay with us all year. Today, we will rant about the Fiesta Bowl with our resident college football insider, Zach Smith. I will take my medicine about the Peach Bowl, and we will talk LeBron with a lifetime Lakers fan. We'll also talk about the Cleveland Browns, some breaking news there. Shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Remember, starting this week, our $5 and up Patreon subscribers will get our episodes a night early. Check it out on www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys Podcast. Let's go.
Where the Pilot Boys at?
Pilot Boys, we get on up. We don't fly, boys, we getting up. So high. Pilot Boys, we get on up. We don't fly, boys, we getting up. All right, V. Man, we're going to talk about this Fiesta Bowl from a number of different perspectives. But let me start with this. As an Ohio State fan, right? Because we're, first and foremost, we're Buckeyes fans. We're, alumni of Ohio State. We are, we're obviously very proud of the university. We're proud of the team. We're proud that they represented us in the college football playoffs, and we're proud that they played as tough as they did against one of the best teams in college football in recent years. They put together an unbelievable showing. Ryan Day, this is his first year as a head coach. Justin Fields, his first year as a starting quarterback. A lot of firsts. And so if you told me at the beginning of the season, hey, you guys are going to go to the college football playoffs and you guys are going to lose to Clemson in the semifinals by less than a touchdown, I'd have been like, wow, that's an amazing season. But as it actually happened, when you actually look at how it happened, why it happened, that's when it becomes a lot larger and tougher pill to swallow. We are obviously Ohio State people, but we're also smart enough to understand that Ohio State could have won that game despite all of the bullshit that was going on in the game, right? So we will say that at the outset and make sure it's very clear that everybody understands Ohio State could have and probably should have still won that game despite the bullshit that happened in the game.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But bullshit happened in the game. And we're going to talk about the bullshit that happened in the game because at the end of the day, it's not the same type of typical bullshit that you see. The bullshit that happened in this game resulted in points being taken off the board unjustly, actually stolen points, right? Not just, a bad call and some yards, switch. No, points actually taken off of the board.
And there is no room for error here. It's essentially, this is the funniest thing about this whole scenario is specifically the drop pass fumble situation. It is very clear how to resolve it, and it was resolved incorrectly by the letter of the law, which is particularly frustrating. This isn't discretion. This wasn't a missed penalty, missed that. There is a replay rule in place to make sure that something like that does not happen. And how it's supposed to be resolved is very clear. Whatever the call on the field has to have indisputable proof to be reversed.
And that's one of the things that I would say is of all the things that happen in football and all the calls that happen in football, there are a lot of things that are convoluted. There are a lot of explanations that we don't necessarily understand. How do they look at this? How do they decide this? But one of the things that we actually have come to understand is that any call that's made on the field, if it goes to replay, there has to be indisputable evidence for you to overturn it. So even if they made a call that was not that great, if that evidence is not indisputable, they're not going to overturn it. That's one of the things that we have come to understand is true. Pretty much.
I've never ever in the history of me watching football seen something like that happen. And most teams, we've been on the other side where it looks more like a incompletion than a fumble or vice versa, but you have to stick with the call.
And again, with that particular call, and there were a number of bad calls in this game. There are many missed calls that we could complain about. You know, KJ Hill was being held in the end zone on one play. Chase Young was being held many different times. But this particular play, the reason why it's so troublesome is because it actually took points off of the board.
Yep.
This is the fucking national championship semifinals against one of the best teams in the history of college football that you're playing against, right? You can't afford for the refs to insert themselves in this type of game and actually steal points from you. That's different than, oh, JK, I wish he would have caught this pass. We do wish he would have caught certain passes. We do. We get it. That's different from, oh, Ryan Day, I wish he would have been more aggressive and would have gone tempo more like he was going earlier. I get it, yes.
The officials are in the game to officiate the game, not influence the game.
That's exactly right. And so there are a couple things, just a couple notes about that game. You had Terry McCauley, who's one of the most, respected NFL veteran officials, who in real time was tweeting this. This is what he wrote. He said, "This is a great angle. There is absolutely no way replay should have reversed this. Indisputable video evidence is simply not there." Not to mention many national sports writers, Michael Wilbon, Stephen A. Smith, all of these got people who are even notorious Ohio State haters inserted themselves in this conversation because they could not believe they had no dog in the fight. So this isn't just about, oh, we're Ohio State homers, of course this is what you're going to say. No. There are people who had no dog in the fight that came on Twitter or social media or used whatever platform they had to show their disgust with the officiating, and it was blatantly against Ohio State, blatantly throughout the game.
And then this is the thing, like this conversation, I want to get beyond us losing and getting robbed, right? This is a larger conversation. What the fuck is going on in college football, and why does this type of shit happen, right? Like, why does it happen? We have to talk about officiating, officials in general, because over the last year, we've seen not just in college football, NFL, NBA, piss poor officiating costing teams games. It started with the Saints. That happened, right? Now we're dealing with this, and it's like every time you start talking about an official, it's like they're holier than thou.
Right.
Fucking Justin Fields has to sit in front of the media after a game and answer questions. Mm-hmm. Chris Olave has to explain why he broke off his route and cost Ohio State the national championship, right? Those are the type of questions he's dealing with. Mm-hmm. The officials can release some little statement afterwards. Why are they not held to accountability like everybody else? A coach is held.
Yep.
Ryan Day has to answer questions as to what happened.
Yeah.
Sean Wade gets ejected from the game.
The SEC
so what is the recourse? There is no recourse if they fuck up.
The SEC head of officiating, he declined to comment. Big Ten officials are coming out and saying, look, that was the wrong call. The national officiating supervisor told CBS Sports that was the wrong call. But the SEC head of officiating, Shaw, decides, oh no, I'm not gonna fucking comment. Who the fuck are you?
Yeah. And then like, here's the thing that really bothers me about this is I didn't know initially there was an SEC crew. But as soon as I heard that, I was like, why the fuck is an SEC crew officiating this when they have a dog in the race? And they say, oh, they didn't officiate their own conference's game. No, why is there an SEC officiating crew for this semifinal and an ACC crew for the other one, who just happened to be the two conferences that the network that has the college football championship also owns the rights and pays tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, sorry, not tens, a year to have the broadcast right. Why would that even exist?
It doesn't even make sense because, and the thing is that people go say, oh, you got conspiracy theorists, Ohio State fans are such crybabies. No, listen, just actually take a step back for a second and listen and be objective and say, does it make sense to you that officials who are part of a conference that have a dog in the fight should be officiating at all? It doesn't make sense. Why not have like you said earlier, in the earlier conversation we had, this game was on the West Coast. You know who lives closer to the West Coast?
Pac-12.
The Pac-12. Why aren't the Pac-12 officials involved? Why aren't the Mountain West officials involved? Why aren't officials who have no dog in the race involved in officiating these championship games? It makes no sense to have.
When we talk about accountability, right? Like this is the same crew that fucked up the Iron Bowl.
Exactly.
And basically gave Auburn a free 3 points, right?
And the thing is even from the standpoint of just the optics, right? Which I heard somebody mention on Twitter. Even from just that standpoint of the optics, okay. Don't have any officiating crew that has any dog in the fight or perceived dog in the fight. It's easy.
Simple.
There's no reason to have them involved. And what happens when you do that is that when things like this happen, now it makes people start to question you. Because at the end of the day, and this is another thing that you had mentioned earlier, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, is that there is a lot of money involved and there are a lot of moving parts in college football. And don't tell me that I can't wonder whether or not there's some shady shit going on, because the reality is we have many instances in the history of sports where we know that shady stuff has happened. Match fixing, like you said before, international issue. Bad calls, refs being paid, ref scandals, we've seen it all. So don't tell me, oh, you can't ask the question, oh, you're just being a conspiracy theorist. That's bullshit.
The ESPN deal with the SEC is now $330 million per year. The ACC deal with ESPN is $250 million. Guess what network has the Big Ten?
Which one?
Fox. Mm-hmm. In a similar deal. So you've got this much money on the line. Tell me why ESPN, who's basically putting their network at risk with the size of these deals, why wouldn't there be? I'm not going so far as saying ESPN is influencing these games, but why wouldn't you wonder?
There's a lot of money at stake, and when there's a lot of money at stake, that's the type of thing that you have to ask.
And how much money was gambled on this game? Officials in college football probably make $70,000 to $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. There's probably hundreds of millions of dollars.
And this was they said this was the most watched game, I think, in college football playoff for sure, college football playoff history. And part of the reason is because it ended up being a close game, which it really should not have been. And so one other call I want to talk about, again, is the targeting call on Shaun Wade. I don't want to spend so much time. My goal was not to spend so much time on officiating, right? Whether win or lose. It never is my goal. I don't want to talk about the officials. In fact, that is the purpose for why they're there, is so we don't actually talk about them, that they help us just usher along the game.
Yep.
But there are certain plays in the game that changed the. Listen, you're playing one of the best teams in the country in the history of college football. The margin for error in this type of game is very low. So yes, you are going to make mistakes as a player. Sometimes they're going to out-scheme you. Sometimes Trevor Lawrence is going to run for a 70-yard touchdown. Yes, that is things that you expect to happen in a game like this. But what you don't expect to happen is these type of calls that impact the game in such a substantial manner and at such a substantial time. That timing when they kicked out Shaun Wade from that game was a huge momentum swing for them, and they scored right after it. They were shut out at that point. They had 0 points. Not only that, but Chase Young was also being held, and his face mask was also being grabbed on that same play. So even if you are going to call that, it should have been offsetting penalties.
Be aware of the consequences for your decisions.
Not to mention that Shaun Wade is also one of the most important players in that game. To have a third person that can lock down in that game was extremely important with the quality of talent that you're playing against. It was not inconsequential at all. And then the other thing is I'm looking at the rule, last thing, in terms of how do they evaluate the targeting rule. And this is how they kind of define it, right? It's defined as occurring when a defenseless player, which Trevor Lawrence was not, or when a player takes aim at a defenseless player, an opponent, for purposes of attacking with forcible contact that goes beyond making a legal tackle or a legal block or playing football. It was clear. He was coming in for a sack. It was a blitz. Trevor Lawrence is 6'5". He ducked his head and tucked the ball in and braced for contact because he knew he was about to get tackled. Mm-hmm. Shaun Wade did not launch. He did not do anything illegal. His arms were wrapped like a perfect textbook tackle, the type of tackle that you would teach your kids to make. And it happened that they hit helmet to helmet, and now you're saying that he's targeting, he's kicked out of the game?
And not only that, it's like, okay, something happens in the moment and official has to respond. This is why replay exists, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you look through and say, does it meet the criteria that we're looking for? Mm-hmm. to call it targeting. Targeting, that Oklahoma play, that was targeting.
Right.
He took out a player that wasn't even involved in the play.
And was defenseless. Was Trevor Lawrence defenseless? No.
Trevor Lawrence had the fucking ball in his hand. The goal of football is to tackle the guy with the ball in his hand.
Exactly.
And it was a blitz, and he sacked him. And
Trevor Lawrence ducked. I mean, again, I say this again because, people who
and
aren't
even if you're
listening-
trying to protect the players, call the 15-yard flag. But to take a player out, this is the dumbest shit ever. With no discretion, just say anytime a helmet-to-helmet hit happens in football, the player gets thrown out. What the hell is that?
It's unbelievable. And the thing is again, the timing that happened, the quality of player, the momentum shift. What happened after that? People want to say, oh, there was still plenty of game after that. You guys are still up. You still had chances. That is all true. That doesn't mean that what they did didn't impact substantially the outcome of the game. For sure it did.
And what are the repercussions? Again, we have officials from the NFL in every conference. Everybody's saying that this was absolutely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What are the consequences for these officials?
There are none.
They took, first of all, let's put this in full fucking context, right? Both teams have players who are not getting paid to come play. What are they playing for?
Yep. JK was hurt, limping around, risking injury. Justin
for
Fields
this,
hurt.
we have seniors coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Fuller, Arnett, all kinds of guys coming back specifically for this opportunity to win a national championship. That's why kids they don't get paid to play college football. They go to place like Ohio State when they're the best in high school. And Okudah said this, we came here to win a national championship.
Yeah.
And to have that taken away by some punk ass dude,
and that's part of what bothers. That's part of what bothers me.
Who
so
is getting
bad.
paid to do his job?
Yeah.
Is
criminal.
It's particularly troubling because what do you say as a coach to these kids who played their heart out?
Yeah.
Okudah made one of the best plays I've seen in the college football playoffs. That was akin to what Maurice Clarett did in terms of how he stripped that ball out of that kid's hand to make a play to change the game for his team that he should celebrate and enjoy. And Fuller picked it up. Our senior safety picked it up and ran it into the end zone. And scored.
Yep. And you took that away from him. And that's what part of what bothers me, the most. In a second here, we're going to bring in our college football insider, Zach Smith, and talk a little bit more about this. But the last thing I'm going to say about this before we do that, and you just touched on it, is that's part of what bothers me so much about this, right? Obviously, as fans, we're frustrated. We're invested. We watch the whole season. We spend money. We go to games. We do that type of stuff. But it's not us that really, really are affected by this the most. It's really the players who put their heart and soul into this game, like you said, who are not being paid for it, who put their bodies on the line. J.K. Dobbins was visibly hurt in that game. We know it. But he was not going to come out. No one was going to get him out of that game because the stakes were too high for him and for his team. Justin Fields was not himself that game. He was not himself. He was hurt. He's been hurt. But yet, he's put his body on the line. Chase Young, Fuller, Okudah, these guys are they're not coming back. They have to go to the NFL because they have to take the opportunity. But this is one of those things in life that, is stripped away from you and you never forget it. When I was in high school, I remember this like it was yesterday. In high school, when we were in the state championship in the 4x1 relay, and me and my third leg, we messed up the handoff. And all we had to do was get top 4 to go to the finals. And we messed up the handoff, and I literally had to stop 100% so we didn't get disqualified. And everybody passed us. And I still got us all the way to 5th. But it was top 4 that went. And I remember that like it was yesterday. And that was high school. And that was a track relay. So you can only fucking imagine, and that's painful to me. You can only imagine the pain that these guys feel. But let's bring Zach in too, because I know Zach has some great insight. Zach Smith, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you guys?
Man,
sounds like you're not having a good weekend,
bro. It's such a struggle because there's so many emotions. My brother sent me a text after the game that I actually posted on Twitter, and it went viral a little bit too, to put kind of perspective on it. He said, look, I don't want to make Ohio State football all about the national championship all the time. We still had an unbelievable season, won the Big Ten, dominated Michigan, went to the college football playoff, within seconds of the national championship. We have to be able to figure out a way to enjoy that season. And yes, in a quiet moment, And when you take a step back and you reflect and you look on it, you say, yeah, that's true, man. We had an unbelievable season. But the way this one happened, it's really hard to swallow. And I don't know if I'll ever get over it, to be honest. What were your thoughts on the game just generally? And, let's just kind of get into a discussion about it.
Well, first, I think just kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, that's what makes Ohio State great, right?
Yeah.
And that's really, that's all walk of life is when you're striving for perfection, which is the only thing that's acceptable for Ohio State. Make no mistake, if they won it all this year, that would have been great, but it wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah.
People would have been like, Fields is coming back. We're going to back-to-back national. Right. It's never enough, right?
Yeah.
But it was a great year, but it was a disappointment because there's one standard at Ohio State, and it's awesome that is the standard. If you're at Michigan right now, that's not the standard.
Right.
So it's cool in that aspect. Now, the game, I think it was you guys talked a lot about officiating, a lot about the missed calls. I really think this came down to an offense that didn't execute down the stretch like we saw. Mm-hmm. Some guys that made some routine plays mistakes.
Yeah.
I mean, JK, the 2 drops he had, the one was tough. It was laid out. The screen was just, you train that all year. It's just eye control.
Right.
And on the biggest stage, you have to have your fundamentals in check.
Yeah.
What's not talked about a lot because of the last drive. So Clemson and Trevor Lawrence hit 3 big pass plays on the last drive to score a touchdown, to essentially win the game.
Right.
What's not talked about is outside of those 3 plays, this defense completely shut down.
Shut them down.
One of the best offenses in the country.
Yeah.
Travis Etienne couldn't run the ball. Couldn't run the ball.
He wasn't effective. You barely heard his name.
3 yards a carry. I mean, the only thing they did do was he was the leading receiver. They got him out of the backfield. He made some huge plays, but it wasn't by running the ball. Right. They couldn't run the ball. The only run game they had was to run their 6'6" statue quarterback.
Right.
Which he's never done.
Yeah.
And their defense was on its heels. People can say what they want about, we kick field goals instead of touchdowns. If not for the Sean Wade play, it was going to continue to go down that path where they would have been punting the ball again.
Yep.
We would have gotten the ball again.
Yes.
And we would have just marched down the field again.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Zach. I want to hear the rest of your thoughts.
Well, I think the biggest storyline that's not talked about right now that happened in that game that people, because of all the atrocities and all this, the refs getting involved, what no one has mentioned is Ohio State played more man coverage than they have all year against by far the best skill they faced all year.
Yeah.
And Damon Arnett and Jeff Okudah locked that shit down. Justin Ross and T. Higgins are first-round wide receivers.
Yeah.
They locked them down.
They did lock them down.
Justin Ross was 1 of 6 over 20 yards. 1 catch of
That's
6.
crazy.
Over 10 yards. He didn't have any catches over 20 yards.
Right.
And T. Higgins wasn't even targeted over 20 yards.
It's crazy.
Those, I don't know.
And the time that they were targeting, like you said, they were one-on-one. They were not getting help, and they were locking them down.
The shit down.
The only thing that started to work for him was Trevor Lawrence running, which,
I mean,
you'll take that. You'll take that,
well,
right?
Because, again, and that's the thing, it's like they are a great team with great players. It was a heavyweight fight. You expect that they're going to hit on some plays.
If you give them an opportunity, they are going to execute and execute well.
Right, exactly. And so
I will tell you this: the other thing that happened in that game that I know you'll be excited to talk about because he's your guy. Austin Mack balled the fuck out.
Oh my God,
he showed why I've been talking about him all year.
Yes.
He's been dinged up, hasn't been healthy,
Yes.
but he was ridiculous.
Even that catch that didn't count, that was outside the end zone, was
ridiculous.
Insane. Yeah,
it was so obvious that our guys had something to prove in this game. KJ Hill, Austin Mack,
Garrett Wilson,
Damon Arnett, Garrett
Fuller.
Wilson. Just
even Chase Young. People want to keep telling me, Chase Young, he hasn't had any sacks. I'm like, man, did you watch that game? That dude was disruptive. Their whole game plan was revolving around Chase Young, not getting Chase Young an opportunity to get involved. The whole entire game plan.
And that's why Davon Hamilton has a huge sack on 3rd down because Chase Young flushes Trevor Lawrence back up into the pocket.
Exactly.
Davon Hamilton gets a sack. No one likes to talk about the impact on the game.
Yes.
They just like to look at the little box score and say 0 sacks. He sucks.
100%.
Our linebackers played well as well.
Yep.
It's just
Baron Browning was an animal.
He was.
I mean, I was
Animal.
It was clear, and I think, I have a friend that told me this that's not a fan of either team. He said, in the first 15 minutes, I was like, Ohio State is way better than this team. And which is crazy because Clemson is an amazing team. But Ohio State, and Venables, I've never seen Venables look confused out there.
He was shook.
I mean, people can say what they want. Venables got his ass handed to him.
Yeah, he did.
He really did. And it was just a lack of execution in the red zone. Otherwise, that was the way the game began and some of the calls. I mean, you watch the 3rd and 1 where Ohio State looks back. They fake cadence, look back because they know Clemson's going to look back, and then they immediately snap the ball. And
I loved it.
It's like just brilliant.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think Ryan had, and that's what another thing that makes me sad as a fan watching that outcome is that, and then you have Clemson playing, RESPECT by Aretha Franklin at the end of the game as if they did something. Like, you guys won a game that you didn't dominate. You weren't the better team. You got helped by officials. Yeah, you won, so you can celebrate whatever.
Maybe there's something to Dabo saying God intervened in this game.
Maybe, but it kills me from that perspective too. And
if the refs are Christian, then maybe. I don't know their religion denomination, but
that was unbelievable. And that's the thing. So so one question I have too is, as a coaching staff, right? So you have a game like this, and that's it. It's the end. You don't have another opportunity this season to redeem. You have to go into the offseason kind of with that sting and that burn. What do you even say to the kids after a game like that?
I mean, it's really just raw emotion. It's thanking the seniors, thanking the guys that are going to leave for a great year and their commitment to the program, and then really educating the young guys on this. This is what the end result looks like if you don't hit your goal.
Yeah.
And as amazing as the season was, it's going to be a real motivating factor. I mean, to be honest, 2020 Ohio State is now a really pissed off beast, and that's scary for the country.
Well, let's talk about that for a second too, because there are a lot of players that are leaving, impact players. I mean, obviously Chase Young is leaving, J.K. Dobbins is leaving, Fuller, Arnett, Okuda, like the whole secondary. Not to mention some other guys, and then also Shaun Wade. There's a big decision on Shaun Wade is supposed to be having this weekend.
It's not really a big decision, right?
Is he? I think he's leaving.
He has to.
Yeah,
he's a first-round corner.
I'm hearing
it's like people talk about it like, well, he was the nickel. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't understand.
A lot of people
don't understand his value beyond that because of what you just said. But people who know that he has first-round talent
for sure.
The only question for him, right, is if he does come back and gets picked next year, he's a top 5 pick versus a late first round pick. People want to say there's not a big difference in millions, but there is a significant difference between the money that a top 5 pick gets and a bottom of a first round pick gets. He's not going to be drafted over Okuda this year.
No.
Next year he comes back, he is the Thorpe Award winner, and he gets the opportunity to play outside. I do think, yes, there is the argument you go get your money, but I do think with the kid that's that talented, let him come back. This is just me speaking. There is a strong argument here as to why he should come back. Like, it's not just about being a first-round pick to me, especially with a kid this talented, right? If you have the opportunity to come back.
There's also the injury risk, though, which also factors in, too.
Yeah, I've always told my players, and what I've always, whenever I've talked to anyone that's played in the NFL, it's always been, if you are a first-rounder, that's generational money you can't turn down.
Yeah.
With the risk of having a bad year, getting injured or whatever, you just can't turn it down. And the reality is that first contract is peanuts compared to the second contract anyways.
Yeah.
So he should take that generational money and just fast track those 3 years to get to that second contract.
Yeah.
And if you do well for 3 years, you're going to get, top 5 money's peanuts compared to what they get.
So one of the things about Ohio State this year that I was impressed with is the depth, right? And I think that's going to bode well for them in 2020, and also the recruiting. So I just want to get your perspective on that a little bit. Like I said, there are a ton of guys that are leaving. I didn't even mention KJ Hill and Austin Mack. I mean, there's a ton of guys that are leaving, but it appears as though Ohio State has a lot of depth and a good recruiting class. Do you see Ohio State positioned in 2020 to go on another run and potentially, be in this situation again?
Yeah, I mean, offensively, they're going to be loaded. People will talk about Master Teague, and I think the biggest concern right now is running back, because as good as JK was, I don't think there's a guy on roster that is a national talent.
Yeah.
I love Master. He runs really hard.
Yeah.
He's kind of a bruiser. He was a great change of pace guy. But you look at the receiver core, tight ends, the O-line coming back is going to be filthy.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole offense is loaded except for that position.
There's an interesting guy in the transfer portal right now, right?
Yeah, very interesting. And that's going to be the answer, right?
Yeah.
Lorenzo Lingard was the top 5-star, was down to Ohio State and Miami, went to Miami like an absolute idiot.
Yeah.
And now, of course, he wants to leave. It's like, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah. You think he ends up at Ohio State?
You never know at this
there's a lot
point.
of
There's
stuff,
so many free free agency opportunities. I don't know how you don't.
It makes
though.
the most sense. For
I don't know
him.
how
It's
you don't.
Perfect, almost like a perfect opportunity.
It's
for him.
no different than Justin Fields. It's
Right.
like Haskins is leaving.
Yeah.
How could you turn down the keys to that Maserati?
Right.
Like how could this kid
The
not go to Ohio
the
State?
entire O line's coming back.
Everyone, it's loaded.
Yeah.
The pass game's going to be ridiculous. It's going to open up the run game. The O line's coming. Everything's coming back.
Yeah.
So I think the offense is going to be loaded. The defense has a number of question marks. I mean, the whole secondary, they have talented young kids, but you don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
And I've seen it both ways.
Right.
I've seen the next year where you come out and go, holy shit, Malik Hooker, who's that?
Right.
And it's like, then all of a sudden you have 3 first-rounders playing again. And that's what Ohio State's done. But I've also seen it where you think you might have that and you go out and you're like, that kid's terrible.
Yeah.
And that's our guy. So
Yeah.
we got to roll with it.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys, like in watching the game, like, have you thought about like how much larger the score differential would have been if Justin Fields was healthy enough to run in that game?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State would have been able to control the game, the tempo a little bit more too, and Justin, there are times when he should have run and he did not run, and I'm like, and that
you could tell he was not.
Yeah, he was not. Yeah,
Well, that's a weapon when at your disposal is probably it's like a nuclear bomb, and you saw it with Clemson. I mean, Trevor Lawrence,
It's an extra blocker.
and Trevor Lawrence is a good runner. He's certainly not a 4.3 like Justin Fields,
Right.
And they still won the game essentially because he could run a little bit.
yeah.
And
Right.
you add in a dynamic guy like Justin Fields running the ball. That's a game changer.
One other question before we get out of here too, is the officiating. Right, we talked about the officiating, V and I earlier. You talked about the officiating on your show, Menace to Sports. And one of the things that I wonder, and I think fans wonder, is what happens after the game. A game like that where there are at least one clear call, and maybe more that is just wrong, and that impacted the game so much. What happens? Does I heard Gene Smith had already publicly made a complaint. Basically, is there a discussion? Is there a recourse? What happens? Like what literally happens?
In reality, nothing. I mean, what happens is everyone on TV and radio and podcasts talks about it.
Yeah.
That's about it. Within a conference, if a group of refs or a singular ref develops a track record of fucking games up, they'll get demoted or fired or whatever. But the reality is that's so few and far between.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to be funny because every week during the season, after the game, if there's a missed call or two, it doesn't even have to be like outrageous. It's just like if there's a missed call, it's more for education purposes. You submit it to the Big Ten. The Big Ten head official reviews it and gives you a response like, yes, we missed that call, or no, we didn't. Here's our explanation. And it's funny because there's been game-changing calls that in my career where you submit it and they're like, yes, we missed the call. And you're sitting there like, and
right.
so now we get to win, or like we get to go play, or what do you mean?
Yeah.
And it's like nothing. We missed it.
And
that's the end.
And I have a question for you because you coach for a good length of time, multiple places, were staff at different places. I want to hear kind of what you have to say about these new kind of conference media deals. You have the Big Ten network affiliated with Fox. You have the SEC network and ACC network affiliated with ESPN. How that money has kind of created chaos and where you see that chaos at.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's definitely a conspiracy theorist point of view. And you were mentioning earlier, I heard you on the show. That doesn't mean it's not real.
Yep.
I mean, you've seen a number of corruption deals in all walks of life where you're like, prior to finding out that is going on, you're like, come on, man, that shit can't be. No way. And then you find out, you're like, holy shit.
Right.
And it all goes back to what you always talk about, V, which is money.
Yeah.
Money just breeds corruption. And so it's concerning. The only caveat I think is I saw Kirk Herbstreit say it, and it is true. The number one college football team in the country for yielding ratings is Ohio State. Has been all year, has been really for a long time.
Yeah.
To think that ESPN wouldn't want them in the game, it would have increased ratings however much it would have.
Right.
It would have only yielded more money for them.
Yeah.
Now I get the conference tie-ins.
Right.
It's definitely concerning, but it's the world we live in. It's like politics. Now we got Fox News and CNN.
Right.
We got Fox and ESPN.
Right.
So here we go.
The pushback that I would have there is if Clemson doesn't continue to represent the ACC in championship games, that ACC TV deal is essentially worthless.
Oh, it definitely that one specifically.
Yes.
Right.
The SEC one will be fine.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the ACC one, that's for sure.
Yeah, so in the short term, maybe Ohio State boosts ratings in the championship game, but in the long term, Clemson being good and dominant is huge for the ACC.
Huge
in that deal,
And it's huge for Fox, especially that we've seen all year the competition and how dirty it's gotten between ESPN and Fox. It carried over with the commentary. Some of these guys were irresponsible commentary. Some of these guys were making about Urban and his family afterwards. It's clear that there's been a line in the sand drawn between two big behemoths with a lot of money. To think there's not some shady stuff going on when the stakes are this high. You have Chris Fowler. These guys are all
Chris Fowler's podcast.
What these media entities are supposed to do is give fans an objective platform by which to watch games. And this money and this TV money specifically, and having ESPN on this side with the SEC and ACC and Fox on this side with the Big Ten,
insane.
It's just not the right way to do things. Especially again, and go back to this again, when the guys that are doing the work aren't making a dime beyond getting a scholarship that is a sunk cost for a university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that we can talk about that
right
over and over, but there is a larger discussion here of
no, and we'll continue to have that discussion
Yes.
and flesh that out, because I do think that what you're saying, it has a huge impact on college football as a whole, not just this particular game, but even where it goes, where it's going to go. One thing I need to point out from last show, give you guys your props for the Oklahoma LSU pick. I was very, very wrong in that game. Although I will say this, that pass interference call that they missed when it was 14-7. If Oklahoma, if they call that the momentum of that game could have been different.
You're reaching.
After
you are
that,
reaching right now.
I'm just saying that it was 14-7. It looked like Oklahoma was getting something. They looked like they were getting in the groove. They still probably would have got their ass kicked, but I mean, at least it would have been something. That was a very bad call that they missed.
That was
very bad.
The issue here is that there needs to be a Big 12 conference ban until they learn how to play defense better than a junior high team.
Yeah, and that's
People
the
are
thing.
talking about
and
Joe.
You know what? And actually, Zach, that brings me to another point that we had talked about on the previous show, which you hammered home very early, and I think it was spot on, and it showed its ass this weekend. Whoever that flipping of Ohio State and LSU from first seed to second seed,
ridiculous.
Was that like may end up being the most important story here, because imagine if Ohio State was 1 and they had to play Oklahoma, and LSU had to play Clemson.
I'm telling you,
that was the hardest road by far. Whoever had to win,
but it changed the outcome of who would be the national champ.
100%.
Because you're watching now. Now, in my opinion, Clemson and Ohio State are the best two teams. Now, the one thing that is changing that dynamic right now is that Clemson just was in a heavyweight title bout, and LSU was not.
Right.
And so now you're going to have a fresher LSU team.
And they got banged up. Clemson guys were getting banged up all game.
And they talked about it in all their post-game post-game interviews. It was just like, even the next day, talking about how sore they were. They've never been in a game like that before.
Yeah.
And they put the national championship game in the semifinals.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have a kind of a bruised up Clemson team going to take on LSU. Now it's more equated. Now I can't say
at home.
Clemson's,
They're playing LSU they're going to it's a home game for LSU.
Pretty much,
right?
yeah.
the reality is, if Ohio State beats Oklahoma, goes to the Superdome and plays the winner of the LSU Clemson game, you're looking at a fresh Ohio State team playing a beaten up 2 or 3 seed, and it's a whole different narrative.
And that's the thing that I think we'll always shed light on here on this show too, is because people, it's not, and those are like kind of the things at the margins that I always like to talk about that people don't want to discuss. But that decision that they made, the College Football Playoff Committee made to flip Ohio State and LSU in that moment, literally could change the future of these programs and the future of kind of college football. And it's crazy that they have that much power to do something like that. And I didn't go so crazy about it when they flipped them, but a lot of people did. And Ohio State beat 3 top 15 teams in a row, essentially, including that game. And Wisconsin was a team that they had already had to play. And I think Wisconsin was ranked like number 8 at that point. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they had a tough first half, but they came back and dominated like a championship team does. And LSU beat an overrated Georgia team pretty badly, and they flip them, and now here's the result that we get. So, again, that doesn't mean Ohio State couldn't have won this game. It doesn't mean Ohio State shouldn't have won this game. But I'm just saying there are a lot of different things that played into the fact that this is the result.
And that's,
that we
you know,
had.
when you talk about conspiracy theorists, like if you break this thing down as a conspiracy, there's a lot of smoke that you can point to, right? And that's what makes this interesting, and that's also what's going to continue to create more ratings and generate more money is the conflict around the result of this game, right?
Right, exactly. And so one last thing, Zach, I want to get you out of here on this is, you know, looking for Ohio State fans, you know, it was obviously a great season, but a disappointing type of ending. And we talked a little bit about this earlier when I was asking about, you know, what is the outlook for 2020 and with guys leaving and so on and so forth. But one question I want to talk about specifically is Ryan Day, right? Mm-hmm. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to him as an Ohio State fan because he delivered an amazing season, not just, you know, with the end result, but literally X's and O's in game, coaching decisions, things that you're like, wow, that dude is special. That's not just a guy who's benefiting from having great talent, right? What are your thoughts on him as a coach, the positives, maybe any negatives, and how you see this program moving forward based on what you've seen?
I think you're watching the young career of a Hall of Fame coach unfold. Yeah. I echoed, or I talked to guy Jeremy Birmingham, who's with I think Land of 10. It doesn't matter. He's been a behind the scenes reporter for Ohio State recruiting and really Ohio State football for a long time. And I used to talk to him all the time. And I told him a year before I got fired that Ryan Day was probably the best coach I've ever been around. And I praised him. And he even mentioned, he came on my show and he said, when I heard you talk about him several times, I was like, that's when I completely wrote my narrative that this is the best coach in the country because he is. And what is
it about him that makes him that?
You know what? I think it's just his. He has a unique ability. First of all, he's brilliant. I don't think you can coach or that, I don't know if you can reach that level of success without being. But he's brilliant. But he also has a unique ability to make decisions that are for the greater good and to progress forward. Right. And that is with players, that is with scheme, that is with recruiting, that is with coaching staff. I mean, the stuff he's done since he was hired, firing the defensive coaches, who he brought in. Right. He's about to make another one. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know this for fact, but it's almost fact. With Mike Urick leaving for Texas, he's going to hire Corey Dennis to be the quarterback coach. And when he does, that will be the most epic hire that a coach has made at that level. To hire basically an unproven, never been a full-time coach. Yeah. But I know Corey very well.
I heard he's a stud, man.
Absolute freaking stud.
Yeah.
And he's going to coach the position that Ryan essentially coaches anyways.
Right.
It's going to be a home run hire. And no one else in the country would make that hire.
Right.
So just the decisions that he makes where it's like, I don't really care what you think.
Right.
I can see the big picture. This is what I'm doing.
Right.
It's like, wow, you're going to fire the whole defensive staff and bring in 2 guys from Michigan and this random guy from the NFL no one knows about. And all of a sudden it's like, this guy's the head coach of Boston College, best defense in the country. Like you just look at it, you're like, my God.
Right.
And then his recruiting class. Yeah. Just everything is like, this is on fire.
Yeah.
One thing that I like seeing in Ryan too is this isn't just some miracle that happened. Like if you look at his resume, NFL experience, college experience, like he built a network at all levels here at a very young age to know what he wants. And I think that's another thing. It's like he's not just some young lucky guy here. He actually went through some work to get here and learned a lot and from a lot of, obviously working under Urban was a huge deal too.
And as well as he made those decisions as the head coach at Ohio State, that he made those calculated decisions in his career. Like when him and I talked about why he went to the NFL, because he was always a college guy, played college football, coached college football, never even sniffed the NFL. Yeah. But he went to work with Chip Kelly for 2 years, and he told me the sole reason why is I didn't want to do anything else except for hone my craft developing quarterback fundamentals. For 2 years, he did nothing, sun up to sundown, except study the position, study the mechanics of the quarterback. And you're watching Dwayne Haskins, you're watching Justin Fields. It's like, that is so calculated and well thought out, and here we are.
And it's funny because, and I think in all walks of life, when you see that level of genius and you go deeper and you go into the story, you're going to hear something like that in the story that's going to separate them from everybody else. So I'm looking forward to it as an Ohio State fan. Obviously, 2019 didn't end the way that we wanted it to, but the good news is that there's always 2020. Here we are. Matter of fact, Happy New Year. It's our first show of the year. Thanks for joining us, obviously.
Absolutely. Happy New Year.
Make sure you guys check out Zach Smith's podcast, Menace to Sports. It's available everywhere, and we will be right back with some more thoughts. Happy New Year. Love the Pilot Boys podcast? Support us on Patreon. Supporters can pledge as little as $1, and we have some cool perks on there. Check out www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys podcast. Show us some love today. You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. This has been a kind of a crazy week as Browns fans, right? You know, The Browns played their last game of the season this past weekend, lost to the worst team in the NFL in the Cincinnati Bengals, and it wasn't even close. They were getting smashed around. Baker Mayfield was getting in fights with fans, you know, either pregame or halftime at some point. That was just ridiculous.
He's so hard to root for.
It was just the whole meltdown. The season that we all believed, even people who didn't like Browns, who are not Browns fans, believed before the season started that this was a playoff caliber team, that they had a very legitimate shot of winning the division. Now the season ends and the Browns are 6-10. They just fired their head coach. They just fired their GM and John Dorsey. It seems like they're restructuring from the ground up. Where do we go from here as Cleveland Browns fans and people who root for the Browns?
Well, where we go from here is just close your eyes
and pray
and open them and say, hey, who's the coach? Who's the GM?
Right.
Because it seems like we have this same story every freaking year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what the fuck is this organization doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the question you have as fans. And, you know, we've talked about this, and we had Jason on talking about the difference between the Browns and Ravens. And we talk about the covenant with fans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like, this comes down to, does this organization give a damn about what we're going through, right? And are they ever going to put a plan in place? Like, I completely understand. There's no reason not to fire Freddie Kitchens. But why do we have an organization in place that Freddie Kitchens could have been hired in the first place?
100%.
The writing was on the fucking wall. The guy had never coached. He was a QB coach at Alabama, called plays for 4 games at the NFL level, and you say, hey, by the way, buddy, you're the head coach of the Cleveland fucking Browns.
With all of this talent, here are the keys.
And that's why people want to talk about the John Dorsey firing, because I think that goes hand in hand there. I know that's going to be more polarizing amongst the fan base because he did do some good things.
He did do some good things, personnel-wise especially.
Personnel-wise, he made some moves. He was aggressive. Nick Chubb, we have to thank him for that for the rest of our lives. But he's the best running back we've had since Jim Brown. But he did draft Baker Mayfield in a draft with Lamar Jackson and Kyle Allen.
Josh Allen,
not Kyle Allen, sorry. And he has hired Freddie Kitchens. That was his
downfall right
decision.
there.
And, you know, these guys, like the greats, they all have fucking their Achilles. And I think his is ego. He hired a guy that he wanted to be a kingmaker instead of just going to the well and saying, hey, I'm going to hire an experienced guy.
Right.
He wanted to make a king.
Yeah, and also maybe have more control, too, because when you hire a guy like that, you're the boss. He's not the fucking boss.
Oh, he was his bitch.
Right.
You know, like he owed everything he got to John Dorsey.
Yeah.
Right? Because Kitchens knew he wasn't going to be he didn't think he was going to be a head coach maybe for another 5-6 years.
Yeah.
If that. Right?
And that's why you can't blame Freddie Kitchens. And that's one of the things that bothered me about one of these local Cleveland media stations. I can't remember which one it was, but they posted a picture of of Kitchens walking out as he was fired, like holding his belongings. And like, you motherfuckers.
It's not fair to the guy.
Yeah.
What they did was they put, you know what we always say, we said this about presidents sometimes, they put them in position to fail. Like he wasn't put in a position to win.
Well, I mean, he was put in the position. If he had the skill set and, you know, had the ability, he was put in a great position given the talent.
I agree with you, but let's you know, we talk about context and you always talk about this, but let's talk about in this specific situation why he was an atrocious hire.
Yeah. Oh, I think he was a bad hire.
No, and why John Dorsey is to blame for that hire and doesn't get any excuses. If you are going to trade to win now, you bring in Odell Beckham, you bring in Sheldon Richardson,
Yeah.
You trade for Olivier Vernon, you know, and you then know these personalities exist. You know Odell Beckham's history. You know who Baker Mayfield is, and all these personalities, and you put this guy in charge.
Yeah.
Like, it is the most atrocious thing that
And that's the reason why. So let's talk about that too, because, you know, who's next, right? Because at the end of the day, Cleveland Browns are still littered with talent, right? They have a ton of, probably the most talent that they've had in many, many decades. And they have, I think, you know, even despite my beats with Baker Mayfield, I still think they have enough to be a very competitive team. They've shown that before in the past, that they have that, even with him. Maybe he's not a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but even with him, he's a quarterback that can do something. The question is, who is the person that you want to bring in next? For me, I wanted Ron Rivera badly because I feel like, based on what you just said, the type of person or personality that you need in there is a disciplinarian, is a no-nonsense type of guy, a guy who can relate to players, but a guy who's not going to let the players run the show. And, of course, you know, he got away to Washington. There's still some other names out there. Who do you see? Where do you want this thing to go?
Well, it's interesting, you know, in my evaluation of the GM position, I would love to see Urban Meyer in that role. Because I think the thing that Urban knows how to do is be a CEO. Clearly, he knows how to evaluate talent. Look at the NFL and look at all the guys from his program, both at Florida and Ohio State, and even Utah. Right?
Yeah.
That have done well. I was iffy about him as a coach, but I think this is a perfect situation, right? He does have a cyst on his brain. And there are some X's and O's things from college to the NFL that I think his game plan doesn't necessarily fit, and he would have to make a lot of adjustments. But as a GM, as a CEO, look, he got Ryan Day at Ohio State. You look at these coaches that have come through Ohio State, and you look at his influence with Dan Mullen here and his coaching tree. It says hire fucking Urban Meyer.
So let's talk
for
about that for a
job.
second, because I think, you know, in some ways I've heard people, there's been a big discussion on social media about Urban, not necessarily as a GM, more so as a coach. But a lot of people have been saying, the Browns hiring Urban Meyer would be a great move. And then on the other side, people are saying this would be typical fucking Browns, hiring a coach that's never done it before. And then in this instance, in your scenario, be hiring a GM that's never necessarily done it before. But at the end of the day, a lot of these guys, how do you be a GM if you've never been a GM? You had to start somewhere. So what are the things that you actually look for that you think will make a great GM? Because you pointed to some of those things already.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a respect level, right, that Urban has objectively as a football mind, and as a talent evaluator, right? That's the number one thing that you need to have as a GM is how do you evaluate talent? And then two, how do you develop talent for the NFL level? The thing that Urban's proved is that his guys, you can say what you want about like how they perform at Ohio State, but once they get to the NFL, they're trained better. They understand the game better, and it's shown in the last few years.
Well, I think that, you know, Urban Meyer is a name that, you know, I think everybody who has any type of vacancy should be considering.
No,
right?
And also here's the other part is he understands and is privy to, as an Ohio guy, right? I do think there is somebody, whoever comes in has to really, really understand
the soul of the Browns,
the soul of the
history,
Browns, and the history and what this franchise means,
right?
Because, and then let him hire the coach, right? Let him, because he's shown that he can go find good coaches, at every position, every level. Just don't. He can be overbearing as a coach and run thin, but as a GM, it seems like especially with what we've seen from this ownership group, they don't really seem to know what they're doing.
Well, it's interesting because I think that in this particular instance, I think for them to make that move now, they must have a plan. Not necessarily a plan that I have a lot of faith in, not a plan that I know if it's going to work, but they must have a plan. And maybe they are looking in that direction, because to fire your coach and your GM,
they must have a plan.
I mean, shit, you better have a plan, because this season rolls around real quick, and OTAs are going to be here real quick.
And you have a team that's built to win now, too. So here's what...
The combine's next month. The draft is a month and a half after that. You better have a fucking plan.
I mean, and just the politics and PR, I do think... I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like Browns fans and Ohio fans, if the Haslam said, "Hey, we're giving the keys to this team to Urban Meyer," I don't think there's much better that you can do from a PR standpoint.
Yeah, well, I think it gives, and part of what Browns fans, I don't know. If
I just want
every
some-
year we kind of get sucked in every year, but one thing that we definitely do need is hope, right? And we need something that gives us an idea that there is some exciting future that's coming. And I think a hire like that, I agree with you. I think a hire like that would make a splash.
Combined with, and we saw this at Ohio State, and we've talked about this a lot, is a young guy that's not a punk.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
a young coach who's not a punk.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy that I really like, that I've seen as a coach, he hasn't proven anything at the NFL level, but if you have Urban standing above him, and we get a guy like Matt Rule from Baylor, you know, I think that would be a good hire. Ron Rivera, you mentioned, would have been ideal, but
the college coach thing is always tricky though. Like it works sometimes it doesn't, you know, and it's kind of like you are taking a gamble. But I guess whoever you bring, the only kind of...
And the other guy that I like is the defensive coordinator from the 49ers, because I love watching that guy more than I like watching the 49ers. Watching that guy's passion on the sideline.
Run up and down the side, yeah.
He is a beast.
Yeah. So Josh McDaniels is one of the names we're hearing.
I don't.
Mike McCarthy. I'm not so excited about it, but I understand. Bringing in someone who's won before and who's used to winning, used to kind of being in that situation. There is value to that, and I think on some level, maybe now is not the time to experiment. Like you said, and I'm not saying that the Urban and Rule are necessarily experiments, but to a certain degree, they are. Maybe it is better to bring in a guy you like McCarthy or someone who's won before.
Yeah, Rule is, let me walk that one back. I think now's not the time to hire somebody like Rule. But somebody like Robert Saleh at the 49ers who has a visible personality, right? Like what Greg Robinson got out of the team last year was because the guy was fired up.
Yeah.
Kitchens is standing on the sideline.
Well, that's the other thing, too, is that, believe it or not, the Browns' job right now is actually a pretty good job. It's not, there's organizational issues and there's stuff like that, and you have to worry about being fired after every season.
And managing guys like Odell and Baker.
But the thing is you talk to most people, Odell's not even really a problem. You know?
He hasn't seemed to be really a problem this year.
So when you have that amount of talent on that team, and you're a coach, I mean, you got to be salivating at the mouth. Yes, there are going to be other things about it that you don't like. Maybe you don't even like the city or whatever, or what you hear about the organization. But I think that you could suck those things up if you get that type of opportunity.
The rumor mill is Josh McDaniels, right? That's what they're saying is the priority hire because of his history developing. Like, he didn't develop Tom Brady. Like, let's stop there.
Yeah.
He already got a job in Denver that he failed at.
Right.
And on top of that, he has shown how wishy-washy he is. Like, what he did to the Colts organization last year, that isn't the guy that you bring in and say, hey, here are the keys to the castle, because of the uncertainty of his history.
Well, here's the other thing, too, that I think, we'll be on watch for is now that you fire the GM and you fire the coach, how is this process going to work? You can't really hire a coach before you hire a GM. And in theory, that GM should be the one who's at least involved.
Give the keys to fucking Urban Meyer, Cleveland.
Right. And I think we will get out of here on that. Give the keys to fucking Urban Meyer, Cleveland. You heard it here first from V. When we get back from break, we'll talk Lakers. We'll talk LeBron. We'll talk LeBron being named AP Male Athlete of the Decade. You definitely don't want to miss that. And one more time, V, say it for him one more time.
Give the keys to fucking Urban Meyer.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. We'll be right back.
We are the dogs, we are the hounds. Never the fears, we blew and we bleeding. So get on your feet, cause we are the Browns. I'm down, rock for my Browns. And if anybody's stepping away, it goes down. I'm down, rock for my Browns. And if anybody's stepping away, it goes down. I'm down, rock for my Browns. And if anybody's stepping away, it goes down. I'm down, rock for my Browns. And if anybody's stepping away, it goes down.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. Let's talk some LeBron James.
When don't we talk about LeBron?
Well, it's funny. We've been doing this show for almost 2 months now. This is probably the first time we've even mentioned his name. I think, obviously, for me, and I said this on Twitter, kind of tongue-in-cheek, basketball season doesn't start for me until Ohio State loses. Ohio State football loses. So
it really doesn't start for me until like March.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's 82 games in a season. But, LeBron obviously is an Ohio kid. We have a relationship, with him, and we always kind of will be connected to LeBron some way, shape, or form. And even Ohio State is connected to LeBron. And, this past week was his 35th birthday. But the big
Happy
news
birthday.
happy birthday, LeBron. But the big news is that he was named AP Male Athlete of the Decade. And, it might just seem like one of those, other awards that you just kind of hear about and you just, kind of move on or whatever. But I kind of think being named the, Athlete of the Decade is a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you consider the people who were, behind him. I mean, you had Tom Brady, who they said was a distant second. Then you had Usain Bolt. You had Messi. And the fifth one, for some reason, I just cannot remember who the fifth person was. But
was it Federer? I hope it was Federer.
I mean, it seems like it would be Federer, but I think when I hear it, it's not gonna be Federer.
That's disappointing.
But you look back at the whole, and you look back at the whole decade, and you say, okay, wow, early 2010s, the move, the decision, then he moves to Miami, leaves the Cavs, he struggles the first year, but then he wins 2 championships, and then, oh yeah, Michael Phelps was fifth, so you kind of think about, the impact of LeBron, obviously as a basketball player, what he's done, but the things off the court. I went and tried to kind of look up the criteria to what they use to determine, and it doesn't really seem like there's criteria. It just seems like there's just voters that vote on it.
And I think the AP is a U.S. based. It's U.S. based.
It is. So what do you think about it? When you hear, okay, LeBron won, you hear that Tom Brady was second, but he was a distant second, like not even close. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's this is why it's disappointing to me. First of all, I love LeBron, respect LeBron. Early on in my life, he helped me make a lot of money.
How so? Tell people that. So you got to tell people more on that story.
When I was getting my MBA in Cleveland, the Cavs made the first finals. I used to do all of the parties for the players. And LeBron would always come out, show love, never charge an appearance fee.
Yeah.
It was great.
Those parties were fun.
Yeah. And just seeing the impact that he had on the community, I just always will respect him. Doesn't mean that I don't have critiques of him as a player. Mm-hmm. But I think when you look at this thing objectively, it's like, this is so unfair to so many people. LeBron plays a team sport. To not even mention a guy like Ronaldo, who, if you look at his Twitter following, Cristiano Ronaldo, he has 200 million followers. Mm-hmm. LeBron has 50 million. Sometimes I get bothered a little bit when we don't give these guys the credit they deserve.
Well, what are his accolades, though? What are the accolades that you think, like Cristiano Ronaldo?
He's been named the Ballon d'Or Player of the Year multiple times. Mm-hmm. He took Portugal to the UEFA Championship. He's dominated at every level. In a sport like soccer, he is the Michael Jordan of soccer. We're witnessing with him and Messi, 2 of the greatest soccer players in the history of the world. And it's not saying that I'm taking anything away from LeBron, mm-hmm. but I just think that sometimes, and then Usain Bolt too, it's like he is unequivocally the fastest man in the world, and no one has ever run faster than him. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I just want to know how they measured. If we're talking about influence off the court, all that stuff, LeBron has lost some championships. Mm-hmm. He has won. He delivered a championship with Cleveland, which obviously gives him a level up. I just would like to know how they evaluated.
So some of the things they mentioned in the article, and this wasn't necessarily.
And Federer is my personal number one for the decade.
Yeah, I mean, look, Federer, Nadal, those guys.
Djokovic, these guys, what we're seeing in tennis, the dominance, if we're talking about dominance within their sport, Federer has been more dominant in tennis. Djokovic has been more dominant in tennis.
But not Djokovic for a decade. Federer maybe for a decade.
Well, the 2010s have really probably been more Djokovic's decade.
The more recent part of Djokovic.
More recent part.
Of the 2010s.
But Federer, we're talking, I always say, in terms of dominant athletes that we've seen in our lifetime, mm-hmm. Number 1, Michael Jordan. Number 2, Roger Federer. And number 3, Tiger Woods. Mm.
Yeah.
When you start talking about, and then obviously you have to understand that I give a little bit more credit to guys who get it done in an individual sport at that level.
Yeah.
than they do at a team sport level. But again, I respect the decision. LeBron has been great for the sport of basketball.
Yeah. I think the media has changed a lot the way we kind of view things, right? So I think before media kind of took over, and social media also, people were analyzing things a little bit more themselves, right? It was kind of like, what did I see? What did I actually watch and see as they're watching the sport in the moment? Now you have a lot of people who are actually even commenting on games or situations that they didn't even watch. They didn't watch it. They just saw what so-and-so said or what such and such reported. They might have seen a clip. They might have seen a highlight. And then they make their whole analysis on the situation based on something they didn't even see. It's like their opinions are not coming from what they're seeing, right? And so I think also now in the social media age, there's so many things that we're also more privy to than we were before, right? Like now, guys have always been philanthropists, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from LeBron, but I say that to say, like the fact that he started at school, the I Promise School in Akron, a huge deal. It's an unbelievable accomplishment, unbelievable achievement with great intentions behind it. But the media has covered that so much now to where everybody knows about it. It's part of his legacy. You can't mention LeBron really without mentioning those type of things.
LeBron is special for this reason. And one of the things that stands out to me is he knows how to be the number one topic of discussion at all times. He knows how to manipulate the media and not let the media manipulate him. Even when they're knocking him, he knows that the value that that's creating. And he's actually a media entity himself. So that's what he's done. He's creating narratives and helping influence the narrative around him, which obviously helps a great deal and something that, you have to look at and respect.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think, and that's the thing is that, so you look at him now and you look at, like you said, narratives. There's certain narratives that follow LeBron. One of them is obviously, the fact that he was young and when he got to high school and he's kind of, when he came to the NBA from high school and he's kind of lived up to that. And then the fact that he went to Miami and won and then came back home as like the golden son and won one in Cleveland, which has never been done. And then the fact that he's, like I said, all the things that he's done.
Man, he's the only child star that's never had a breakdown, right?
Right.
Like that's huge.
Yeah.
Like he's never had a lapse. Like he's been consistently
no scandals, never been punished for, steroids or HGH.
injury, major injury issues except for last year.
So I think that also factors it into it too, right? Kind of the Iron Man aspect of this thing as well, is that a guy who's lasted that long, who's played that long and given us so many moments, 8 straight finals, even though he didn't win them all, right? He went to 8 straight in the 2010s. He won an Olympic gold medal. He's won multiple MVPs. Like he's given us so many. You can't really mention the 2010s without talking about LeBron.
He definitely has an argument. But what bothered me is when I went down that list and I didn't see these guys.
Yeah.
Like Federer. Like if we're really measuring athletes for success in their sport, like I know tennis isn't the most popular sport in America, but how difficult it is to be that dominant at that sport is very underestimated. And what Federer has done, we've never seen in the history of tennis ever. Yeah. He's in his late 30s. Most tennis players' careers end at 30.
Yeah. No, Federer, I think, and that's, again, when you're talking about these things too, a lot of times you're splitting hairs, right?
But he wasn't even
even on the list, right?
Yeah, that's my issue.
Exactly. So and that's one thing about LeBron. This is, and I guess this isn't just about LeBron then, right? Because like I said, Federer not being on the list has nothing to do with LeBron, right?
No, it doesn't. It's not LeBron's fault, right? I'm not blaming LeBron for that.
I know, but it's just, and all these lists and stuff like that, they're flawed. You're talking about people who vote, and you have no idea what motivations or anything they have when they're voting. But nonetheless, he was named AP Male Athlete of the Decade.
It's a huge accomplishment.
Shout out to Serena Williams, who was named AP Female Athlete of the Decade.
There's not much of a discussion in that one.
So she's a beast. But when we get back from break, we'll actually talk to a Lakers fan about LeBron, and I think it's a good thing because as us, we're LeBron fans and Ohio boys, and we wanted to see LeBron stay and succeed here forever, and he left and went to LA, and you can't really blame him sometimes, but it still hurts, and we would still like to see him in the Cavs uniform, especially when you watch the Cavs play now. And the Lakers fans didn't really embrace him all the way together, and that also was annoying for us as well. It would have been more acceptable.
It's hard for us as Ohio people, right? And what we represented to hear about a guy like LeBron going Hollywood. We want him to ourselves.
Yes.
The blue collar Midwest.
Exactly. And if he's going to go
mentality.
somewhere, we would want him to go somewhere where we think that he was unanimously going to be embraced, and we know he's not. So when we get back from break, we'll talk to a Lakers fan about that, about their journey with LeBron, about whether they embrace him, whether they don't embrace him, whether they liked it, whether they didn't like it. And we'll talk some more LeBron when we get back. Thanks for listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Spotify and follow us on social media at Pilot Boys Pod on Twitter and at Pilot Boys Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Pilot Boys on YouTube. Don't forget, sharing is caring. So, V, we've been talking about LeBron. You know, LeBron is always a hot topic. If you watch,
One of the
any of
most
these
polarizing people in sports.
Yeah, you watch any of these shows, literally, 3 times a week they have a topic that's related to LeBron. Most of them are dumb topics, but this one is actually a fairly interesting topic. If you're a sports fan, LeBron James was just named AP Male Athlete of the Decade. And that's, maybe there are politics involved, maybe there's bias involved, maybe there's, United States bias involved, which we'll talk about and we've talked about. But he was named AP Male Athlete of the Decade, and they said that the voting wasn't even close. Tom Brady was second, I believe. Usain Bolt third. Lionel Messi was fourth, and fifth. Fifth is escaping.
I just would like to know what they measured it by.
Yeah, I tried to look it up and see, and I didn't really see the criteria, but they said that it was in a landslide. So we actually have, as LeBron fans, and Cavaliers fans and Ohio fans. LeBron leaving us to go to the Lakers was frustrating, and so we wanted to actually bring in someone who's a Lakers fan, one of our friends, William Guilford, an attorney at law who's been a lifelong Lakers fan, and just kind of get his perspective on that. William, are you there?
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, how are you,
Mac?
man?
What's up, V?
What's up,
I'm
man?
good.
Hey, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us on the Pilot Boys podcast. We've had many, many, many discussions over the years about LeBron and LeBron versus Kobe, LeBron versus Jordan. Right. And it never really occurred to me that we would ever have this kind of conversation where it's LeBron is now a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. I never even thought that would happen. You probably did not either. And so it was interesting for us, the fact that we've had these conversations and then we're Ohio fans and you've been a lifelong Lakers fan, it just makes it even more interesting. So first question I have for you is, as a Lakers fan, what was it like when you first heard that LeBron was coming to the Lakers? Was it happiness? What was the feeling that you had?
All right, so the rumors were out there for a while that LeBron might be coming to the Lakers and all this and that. So it wasn't quite a surprise when I heard it, but I can't say that I was terribly happy about it. And that's just coming from it was an awkward move, I think, by LeBron, just him coming to the Lakers. Look, this day and age, people follow players, they become fans of players. Like I've always said this, that the NBA doesn't have a fan base, they have a stan base, right? So it's like, you have your favorite player and that's who you follow, that's who you root for. So for the past, I'd say 15 years or so, it's been kind of, the media and fans have been playing up this whole LeBron versus Kobe rivalry. And that, as such, LeBron's probably the people who are, his biggest rivalry is Kobe and Lakers fans. So because they're both LeBron's, and Kobe are fighting, each other in history, in historical measures, who's the post-Jordan greatest of all time,
right?
Who's supposed to go, right?
So,
I wasn't terribly happy. I thought it was an awkward move. It's kind of like Larry Bird coming to the Lakers in the 80s or the 90s.
Yeah.
That's how it felt.
right.
But look, and LeBron didn't do a press conference and all that when he came to LA. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But everybody likes LeBron as a person, as a human being, as a man. He's a good guy. But on when it comes to basketball, like he was our rival. Our rival, and now here he comes. He's joining up with us. But
so now,
to it.
So now, how do you look at it? Because now he's there, right? You guys are obviously, you have Anthony Davis. There are other pieces of the puzzle now. It seems as though your team is kind of coming together and taking shape. And now there seems to be a lot of excitement in LA. Have you bought into that yet, or are you still kind of reserved? What are your feelings about him being on the team now that that's happened?
Yeah, it's great now. I mean, right now is everything is good. LeBron is winning. It looks like his plan, the Lakers' plan to add him to the team and to get AD following that might work. But with all that said, at the end of the day, he still has to win a championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to win one. I don't even say he has to win two. I just say he has to win one. If he wins one, the move was well worth it. It was a great move, and everybody's happy. And LeBron can officially put himself in the conversation of greatest of all time, in my opinion.
Will, I have a question for you. Did you want Kawhi to come to the Lakers, or did you think that would have just been competitively unfair? As a fan, right? Like, we grew up in like the 90s, 2000 era where there was more competition and guys didn't just join teams full of superstars. Did you want Kawhi to come, or what were your feelings on that?
Man, I really wanted Kawhi to come to the Lakers. I wanted Kawhi, and this is another thing here. It's another aspect of LeBron that I think is a thing. I think had LeBron not been here, I think Kawhi would have come this summer. Yeah. So you could take that however you want, and that's another feeling I have. So that's why I say the standard for LeBron is really high. He has to win the championship, or else it's a failure. Because I think we would have had Paul George and Kawhi had LeBron not come here. But now we have LeBron and AD. But from a competitive standpoint, that team would have been crazy unfair. LeBron, AD, and Kawhi. But I mean, as a Laker fan, having Kawhi there on the team and being able to root for that guy, man, oh God.
I mean, you guys have been through some down years, so I guess that is understandable.
And so one other thing too, and we've always wondered this, when when LeBron first went there, there was a lot of discussion about, him, some people saying, oh, he's automatically the greatest Laker ever now, and stuff like that. And I used to piss off a lot of Lakers fans. What do you think he has to do to be considered not necessarily the best Laker ever, right? Because you guys have some amazing.
He's never going to be the best Laker. He doesn't have enough time to be the best Laker ever.
But what does he have to do to start inserting himself in that conversation and really get, capture the hearts of Lakers fans?
Well, look, I mean, if he wins one more championship, that gives him 4 for his career, and one with 3 different and a championship with 3 different teams. That puts him, I think, in the GOAT conversation, and that clearly puts him ahead of Kobe in the hierarchy, in the overall hierarchy of NBA players, right? I think right now, and I know this. A lot of people say that he's already above Kobe. That's just not my opinion. I just think he's below him in the overall ranking. But in order for him to get on the Lakers, I mean, if he wins one championship, I think he gets on the Lakers Mount Rushmore. Can he be considered the greatest? And I say that just because of his whole body of work. Right. And the fact that he won a championship with the Lakers. I mean, the man's body of work is already crazy. It's going to be ridiculous at the end of his career. And then you add another championship with the Lakers to that, then I think he gets on the Lakers Mount Rushmore. But being the greatest Laker of all time, nah, you can't put him ahead of Magic, Kobe, and Kareem.
So let me ask you,
can't do it no matter what.
Let me ask you kind of the flip side question too. Then let's say he never wins a championship with the Lakers. Let's say he gets closer. Let's say they lose to the Clippers, God forbid, for a Lakers fan. But let's say they lose to them in the Western Conference Finals this year. Let's just say Kawhi is always in the way, or they just never get it done. How do you think then this move will be viewed kind of by Lakers fans, and what do you think the response will be there?
See, in my opinion, if LeBron doesn't win a championship, that's how things get really interesting. That's when things get really crazy, really interesting. Fans start fighting, all this stuff. I think if LeBron wins the championship, everybody's good, everybody's happy. But if he doesn't, then he's not. You can't. It's a failure. The move to LA is, LA picking him up, I think, is a failure. We could have had Kawhi, and then if Kawhi ends up beating him and then winning another championship, then it kind of looks like Kawhi has his number. And then you start having to ask yourself, is Kawhi better than LeBron?
Look, I think Kawhi would have gone. I think Kawhi, just how he's built, he wanted to create something with the Clippers that hasn't been done, right? Like, I hear you with saying, if LeBron wasn't there, he probably would have come to the Lakers, but I really do think that Kawhi, as a LA kid, he wanted to do something that had never been done before, which was deliver a championship to the Clippers, right? And so
Right.
I want to key in right there, right? That's probably going to be the Western Conference Finals, Clippers, Lakers.
Mhm.
Where does that leave LeBron in that discussion, even at 35 years old, right? If Kawhi comes to the West with the Clippers and dominates him for 2 years, do you think a lot of Lakers fans are going to become Clippers fans? And then also, how does that impact negatively how LeBron will be viewed, specifically being the guy that allowed the Clippers to finally become a relevant team?
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of Lakers fans have probably have already become Clippers fans. I mean, not me, but yeah. If Kawhi beats LeBron in the playoffs, oh man, that's gonna be a real, I think, bad look for LeBron, for the Lakers. Yeah, I think a lot of people will become Clippers, and if he ultimately wins the championship this year, I mean, a lot of people are gonna become Clippers fans. I mean, if Kawhi wins the championship this year, I mean, he's starting to insert himself into all-time GOAT conversation.
He is.
So. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting playoffs for sure.
All right, one last question on LeBron, and we'll get you out of here on this, Will. You mentioned earlier the kind of, I guess, over the past decade, pretty much, while LeBron was building up his accolades to be AP Male Athlete of the Decade, there was this battle that was always between him and Kobe, right? And even on social media, the Twitter world kind of amplified that battle and almost made them into, you couldn't like both of them. You had to choose one. And so it seemed as though, I don't know how real the rivalry really was, or if it was just kind of something that was manufactured by the people who were saying LeBron was better and the Kobe fans saying there's no way that he's better. During that period of time, what was that period of time like for you? Because I know that you were, we used to have battles, for many years, and you used to obviously think that, Kobe was the GOAT or going to be the GOAT. And then here comes LeBron. What was that period of time like for you?
Oh, when the media started pitting Kobe fans, I guess, against LeBron fans. Yeah. So I mean, look, it was that would have been a good rivalry had they actually met in the finals.
Right.
But I mean, it still is, a rivalry for historical purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, earlier, these guys, I think Kobe and LeBron are kind of battling for who's the post MJ great, right? Who's the best in the post MJ era. LeBron still has some path to actually being the overall GOAT as well, though I don't think that window is that wide as some people might. But he has a path there. But that's just what they're battling over. I mean, this is about the legacy of these players.
Do you think, and this is just being honest, like I think about this, do you think that just by looking at the type of players they are, that LeBron even belongs in the conversation with Kobe and Mike, right? Or is he more in, like, you put him with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in a separate conversation, right? In terms of the type of players they are.
So let me ask y'all, what do y'all think about that question, though? Just to turn the question on you, V, real quick.
Well, we've battled for a long time, I think obviously there's MJ, and then I think his maniacal obsession with the game.
Right.
I think him and Kobe have that, right?
Right.
I think part of what makes LeBron such a great overall player is that he cares about a lot of different things, right? Like, I think if I need somebody in the clutch to win me a championship, 1A is Jordan, 1B is Kobe, right? And there are probably a couple other guys that I put on the list above LeBron, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't belong in the conversation. I just think that it's unfair to everyone involved to compare players with one skill set to LeBron. LeBron is great for other different reasons than I think Kobe and MJ are, right? And I think Kobe and MJ also defensively are a superior individual defenders to LeBron. So
I think LeBron doesn't get a lot of the credit for being kind of a basketball maniac and genius that he's starting to now, but that Kobe and Mike get, because he wasn't always as intense as them. You know, he would dance on the sidelines with his players, do handshakes and high fives. He'd laugh. You see him play with his kids. Those are things you didn't see Michael Jordan and Kobe do, right? Those dudes were just like intense. And I think because of that, people downplayed a little bit of LeBron's level of intensity and his level of film study and basketball study and attention to detail. And I think now people are starting to kind of understand, at least just from a basketball IQ standpoint and also kind of from a maniacal obsession standpoint, they're starting to understand, wow, how gifted he is. Even maybe he has a photographic memory. I don't know. You know, he'll run down a play and he'll tell you the last 2 minutes of a game. You're like, what the? Like a game that he wasn't even in, you know? In terms of skill set, like V said, I think obviously Kobe's was exactly Jordan's pretty much. I mean, he modeled his game after him. Kobe wouldn't exist as he existed if there was no Jordan. So they're most similar in that regard. LeBron's skill set is different, like V said, but I do think that in terms of when you're talking about GOAT, right, these conversations are not scientific. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's kind of like, you know, who do you want on your team? Who do you think can get it done? And, you know, who's bringing home championships at the end of the day? So I think when it comes to that, you can compare all these guys. At the end of the day, the final answer does not really matter. You know, I mean, we make it seem like it does, but at the end of the day,
it's Jordan. It's Jordan and everyone else. We all know that, but you know.
But LeBron,
it's Jordan and everybody else. I mean, I think.
And for you, Will, to confirm that, because there was a point during Kobe's career, he had an argument. You said if he gets, that's what I'll give you credit for, is the fact that he didn't reach those measures that you thought he needed to reach.
Exactly.
Leaves Jordan.
That's the thing. So that right there, V, like you know me, we go way back when Kobe was in his prime and all that stuff, and back when Boston and Lakers were, you know, the matchup of the, you know, just the game to watch. So that's the thing about Kobe. I used to argue with you guys, and I used to say, look, Kobe at the end of the day, man, this dude, he might have X amount of championships. He might have the all-time scoring title, all that stuff. He could be GOAT if he does all that. So he didn't reach those. He didn't reach those measures. He didn't out championship Jordan. He barely outscored him and played many more years than he did.
Right.
So, you know, he didn't reach all those measures. And, you know, I left it alone.
Yeah.
It seems like the issue I have with LeBron and what it seems like with him and some of his fans is that it seems like they're trying to create a different standard to kind of fit whatever he's done.
He is so polarizing, right? Like the people that dislike him, they won't give credit to anything he does. And the people who love him, he can do no wrong. He can lose 4 championships in a row and they'll go, oh, but he made it to 8 straight. And it's just it's a cultural shift, right? And I think it is interesting to see like how this is measured. I mean, anybody who says that LeBron isn't one of the greatest players of all time is a hater, right?
Right.
But but the problem that I have is someone who wants to analyze him objectively. In the media polarization that we live in, it's like you're a hater too, just because you're accepting his greatness, but not saying that he's better than these guys.
Well, I think the other thing too is that the standard for LeBron, and this is true in other circumstances also, is that, you know, there are, if you look at like kind of context, right? Will, we talk about this all the time. We battle, what does context actually mean, right? You look at the context of some of his championship runs, like the first one with the Cavs. I mean, did you really expect him to win the championship? No, but yes, it counts against him that he lost, right? So it's kind of like, I think some LeBron fans overdo it with context. They try to provide too much context to his failures, right? Yep. And I think some LeBron haters don't want to provide enough context to it. But listen, we obviously love LeBron over here, right? We are, you know, I'm an Ohio guy. V's an Ohio guy. He brought one of the greatest moments to us in Ohio sports history, winning that Cavs championship in 2016. And, you know, the reality is, and you're right, Will, was one of the things you said earlier about fanhood. Now it's changed a little bit. Part of it is because organizations change, coaches change, players change all the time. It's hard to just stay loyal to one, especially in professional sports, to just one franchise. A lot of times we follow players, and I found myself doing that a little bit. Obviously, I still root for the Cavs, but it's it's hard to be excited
Can't
about
watch
a
it.
team.
They're unwatchable.
that you can't watch.
They're
So
unwatchable.
by default, I'm kind of rooting for LeBron over there with Lakers. So
Right.
anyway, thank you for joining us on the show.
Right.
Obviously, we'll probably bring you back to talk more LeBron
Yep.
stuff later as things start to heat up in the
We
playoffs.
gotta talk about Magic, man. We gotta talk about the Magic, man.
We got to talk about Magic. We got to talk about everything, man.
Yeah,
we can do it. I appreciate what you guys are doing, man, and thanks for having me on the show.
Oh no doubt. And good luck. Obviously, good luck to you and the Lakers this season. We'll talk later.
All right, my brother.
All right,
Take
man.
care.
Okay, bye.
Love the Pilot Boys podcast? Support us on Patreon. Supporters can pledge as little as $1, and we have some cool perks on there. Check out www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys podcast. Show us some love today. Welcome back to the Pilot Boys podcast. Before we get out of here, I want to give a special message to the Buckeye fans. I know right now it hurts. I am in the same type of pain that you guys are in. But we must realize that there is a new day, pun intended, at Ohio State. And there are a lot of other programs that you could be right now that I don't think you would want to be.
Yeah.
So we got to take that one and go. 2020 is going to be a great year. Ryan Day is ready. Got a lot of recruits, got a lot of guys coming back. The sun will shine again. Go Bucks. That's all we have for today's show. Big thanks to our guests, Zach Smith and Will Guilford. Thanks to everybody for listening. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Subscribe to the Pilot Boys podcast on Apple, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube. And please follow us on social media at Pilot Boys Pod on Twitter and at Pilot Boys Podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
And always remember, be you. You is fly.
Pilot Boys out!
Where the Pilot Boys at? Pilot Boys, we get on up. We don't fly, boys, we getting up. So high, so high. Pilot Boys, we get on up.